She paid just $600 for an old 1965 Ford Mustang, rusted, silent, and forgotten in a barn. Sierra Baldwin thought she was buying a junkyard project. But 2 weeks later, the original owner showed up at her garage, not to take it back, but to deliver a surprise so personal, so powerful, it would change her life forever. What started as a simple purchase turned into a journey of legacy, loss, and the kind of emotional restoration no manual could ever teach. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. 2 weeks earlier, the morning sun crept across the cracked pavement of Oak Hollow Auto, warming the windows just as Sierra Baldwin flipped the lights on in her one-bay repair shop. Half of them flickered. The other half gave up months ago, and she hadn't had the heart or the money to fix them. The garage had been her father's before he passed. She was 25 now, running it alone, and every oil stain on the concrete floor felt like part of her childhood. The walls were lined with mismatched tools and dented cabinets. Her coffee maker took longer to start than most of the cars she worked on, and the silence in the mornings was only broken by the sound of old dreams humming in her head. Business wasn't great. People patched their cars until they fell apart. No one had money for big repairs anymore. But Sierra stayed open, not for profit, for pride. That Thursday, a man walked into her shop with a smirk, a thick folder, and a story. Said he had a 1965 Ford Mustang sitting out in the hills west of town. "It's yours," he said, "if you've got $600 and a way to haul it." She didn't hesitate. She'd been fixing other people's dreams her whole life. Maybe it was time to restore one of her own. The Mustang arrived on a flatbed the next afternoon. Rust ran along the doors like veins. The windshield had a crack shaped like lightning. One tire was flat. The others looked like they hadn't touched asphalt since the Reagan era. Sierra watched the driver lower it into Bay 2, her arms crossed and eyes squinting in the late afternoon sun. "You sure this thing's worth $600? He asked. She didn't answer, because what she saw wasn't the rust. It wasn't the sagging rear suspension or the moss along the trunk line. She saw her father's knuckles, bruised and blackened, tuning a carburetor on a Sunday morning. She saw herself at age 10, handing him a wrench too big and getting a wink in return. She saw potential. Once the flatbed pulled away, she stood alone with the car. The shop fell quiet again, just the soft ticking of the Mustang's metal cooling in the shade. Sierra reached out and touched the hood like it was breathing. And then she got to work. By the end of the first night, the seats were pulled, carpet, moldy and reeking of mice nests, gone, glove box empty, save for a single faded Polaroid of a boy beside the car, maybe 16, grinning, grease on his chin. Someone loved this car once. That much was clear. She tacked the photo up on her tool board. 3 days later, she had the hood open. The V8 engine was intact but frozen solid. Nothing turned. Oil like syrup. A bird had nested in the air, cleaner. She muttered under her breath, "You're gonna fight me every inch, aren't you?" That's when the bell above the garage door rang. She wiped her hands, walked to the front, and stopped. An older man stood there, mid-60s. Maybe work boots. A worn leather jacket zipped halfway. His hair was silver, his expression unreadable. But when his eyes landed on the Mustang, they softened. "That her?" he asked quietly. Sierra nodded. "You the one who sold it?" He gave a single nod. "Name's Benjamin Rhodes. That car's been sitting behind my barn for 20 years. He paused. Didn't expect anyone to actually show up, especially someone who knew what they were doing. Sierra raised an eyebrow. "You came back to take her." He chuckled. No. She's yours fair and square. He looked past her, into the garage, at the car half disassembled. I guess I wanted to see if someone could bring her back. A long silence stretched between them. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope, handed it to her without explanation. "What's this?" Sierra asked. "Her story," he said simply. "Build sheets, repair notes." The original bill of sale from '65. Letters, photos, my son, Caleb. He bought that Mustang with his own money when he was 17. Restored it with me, bolt by bolt. We spent 2 summers on that engine together. Sierra's throat tightened. What happened to him? Benjamin's jaw shifted, like he was holding something in. He stared at the floor for a moment before answering. "Iraq, 2004. I got the car back, but..." He motioned toward the Mustang. "Couldn't bring myself to touch it again. Just covered her up and let time take her." Sierra held the envelope like it was made of glass. "I'm so sorry." He shook his head. "No, don't be. I think maybe I was waiting for the right person to come along. Someone who didn't just see rust and work, but heart." His voice cracked on that last word. She didn't know what to say. So she didn't. She just nodded. And for a moment, they stood together in that quiet garage, not as strangers, but as people who had lost something and maybe, just maybe, were helping each other find something again. "I'll do her justice," Sierra said softly. "I believe you will," he replied. Then, as he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Oh," he added, pulling out one more item from his pocket. "A key. Old, worn smooth. She still needs this." He placed it in her hand, curled her fingers around it, and left without another word. That night, Sierra sat at her workbench long after the shop had closed. The old key from Benjamin Rhodes rested beside her coffee mug, next to the manila envelope he'd left. She hadn't opened it yet. Something about the weight of it, the emotional kind, not the physical, made her want to wait until everything was still. The shop lights buzzed overhead, and outside, the cicadas sang in the pines. Sierra finally untied the string holding the envelope shut and began to sift through the past. Inside were yellowing documents, handwritten notes, oil-smudged diagrams, and dozens of old photographs. Some were grainy Polaroids, others printed from 35mm rolls. They all told the same story: Caleb Rhodes, a boy with a quiet grin and blackened fingernails, slowly bringing a lifeless Mustang back to glory with his father at his side. Sierra felt her throat tighten as she looked at a photo of Caleb. Maybe 18, standing beside the Mustang, freshly painted cherry red, arms crossed and proud. That Mustang wasn't just a car, it was a relationship, a legacy. She turned to the last item in the envelope, a folded letter. It was addressed, not to her, but to the next owner, to whoever you are. If you're reading this, then my car is in your hands. I hope you've got a good set of tools and a bit of fire in your gut. She's not easy, she's not perfect, but she's got a soul. This car saved me, once. My dad and I, we weren't always good at talking, but we could always turn a wrench together. Building this Mustang with him, it taught me everything about patience, about grit, about love. If you're fixing her up, I have one favor to ask. Don't just restore her to factory. Make her yours. Build her the way you dream, not the way the manual tells you. Cars like this, they're meant to carry stories, not just engines. And if you find something strange under the passenger seat, that was intentional. Keep it or pass it on. Whatever feels right. Thanks for giving her another life. Caleb Rhodes. Sierra sat in silence for a long while, the letter resting open in her lap. Then she stood up. The passenger seat had already been pulled days ago, but she hadn't checked underneath the carpet padding yet. Most old cars had nothing there, just rust and dirt and maybe a few dead bugs. She grabbed a flashlight, stepped into the garage, and knelt beside the empty passenger side floor pan. With a screwdriver, she pried up the fraying edge of carpet insulation. Something shifted. She reached in. It was a small, beat-up cigar box wrapped in black electrical tape. Her heart started to pound. She carried it to the workbench and carefully cut the tape away. Inside were 3 things: a silver chain with a St. Christopher metal patron saint of travelers, a flash drive labeled simply Dream Build, and a cashier's check, folded in half, brittle with age. Sierra's breath caught when she opened it. $18,000, made out to cash, dated July 14, 2004. The memo line read, "For Mustang completion." Her hands trembled. The next morning, she called Benjamin. He didn't speak at first, just listened as she described the box. "I thought I lost that check," he said quietly. "He showed it to me a week before he deployed. Said he'd saved up every penny from side jobs. Said when he came back, we'd finish the build." There was silence between them again, thicker this time. He never came back. Benjamin finally said, "After he died, I searched that car for weeks. Thought maybe he'd stashed it in the glove box, or the trunk. I stopped looking eventually. I guess I wasn't ready to find it." Sierra was quiet for a long time. Then, gently, she asked, "What do you want me to do with it?" Benjamin chuckled through something that almost sounded like a sob. "What he asked you to do? Make it yours." And just like that, a $600 Mustang became something more, a legacy reborn, a second chance, not just for a car, but for everyone it ever touched. The morning after finding the cigar box, Sierra arrived at the shop before sunrise. She didn't start the coffee pot. She didn't check her messages. She just stood at the bay door, looking at the Mustang, and saw it differently. Before, it had been a project, a beat-up relic she bought on instinct and maybe a little desperation. But now it was something sacred. This car wasn't just a machine. It was a memory capsule, a conversation between a father and son, frozen in bolts and steel. And somehow, through fate or faith or sheer dumb luck, that conversation had found her. She picked up the St. Christopher medal from the workbench, turning it over in her hand. The chain was worn, the edges dulled, but it was warm to the touch, like it had been waiting to be held again. Sierra clipped it onto her keychain, just behind her own shop keys. It felt right. Then she opened her laptop and plugged in the flash drive. It booted up slowly, as if hesitant to give away what it held. Inside was a folder titled Final Plan, and within it drawings, CAD files, scanned sketches, parts lists, even a custom paint code, Rhodes red, metallic cherry, 30% darkened. Caleb hadn't just dreamed of finishing the Mustang, he'd engineered it. The flash drive held plans for a custom suspension system, upgraded disc brakes, performance tuning, even hand-drawn tweaks to the dashboard layout, small touches to make it uniquely his. And now, it was all in her hands. Sierra sat back in her chair and stared at the screen. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't trained like that. Sure, she could rebuild a transmission in her sleep, wire up a new ECU, machine a brake rotor if she had to, but this was someone else's dream. And a damn ambitious one. But then she remembered the letter. Don't just restore her to factory, make her yours. That phrase rang in her head like a bell. Maybe this wasn't about being perfect. Maybe it was about being faithful, not to the exact lines on the page, but to the heart that had drawn them. She rolled back her stool, grabbed a notepad, and wrote across the top Project Dream Build Phase 1. It began with cleaning the frame. Every inch of rust had to go. She worked slowly, methodically, talking to the car as she did not out loud, not exactly, but in the way that only mechanics and musicians do, listening, feeling, responding. Word spread around town faster than she expected. First it was Pete from the parts store, who brought over a box of spare fittings and refused payment. Then came Mrs. Avery, who'd taught Sierra auto shop in high school. She showed up with a box of donuts and said, "Mind if I get my hands dirty?" By the end of the week, she had a makeshift crew, a teenager named Leo, who wanted to learn welding, a retired machinist who used to work for GM, even Father Kent, the local preacher, who admitted he once rebuilt a Chevelle in another life. They didn't come because they loved Mustangs. They came because they saw what Sierra was doing, not fixing a car, resurrecting a promise. Something shifted in Sierra, too. For years, she'd been fixing cars just to get by, to survive. She hadn't dared to dream beyond the next repair ticket. But now, she was waking up with fire in her chest. Her hands were greasy, her nails cracked, and her heart full. Each bolt she turned felt like connection. Each part she replaced felt like a page in a story that hadn't been finished until now. One night, after the crew had gone home and the tools were finally quiet, Sierra sat in the driver's seat, still bare metal, no upholstery yet, and stared through the cracked windshield. She whispered, "We're gonna finish this together." And in that moment, surrounded by blueprints, oil stains, and the quiet hum of midnight Georgia air, she realized this wasn't just a rebuild, it was a rebirth. By late spring, the Mustang no longer looked like a forgotten relic. Its once faded shell had been stripped, sanded, primed. The frame gleamed beneath fresh suspension arms, and the engine rebuilt from scratch with the help of blueprints on Caleb's flash drive, now purred softly under a soft engine light, like a beast finally waking from a long sleep. The color a deep, haunting red with a metallic cherry gleam, exactly as Caleb had envisioned in his notes. She called it Rhodes Red. One Sunday afternoon, as Sierra and Leo were installing the rear axle, a man with a DSLR camera walked into the shop, adjusting his glasses. "You Sierra Baldwin?" he asked. She nodded cautiously, wiping grease from her fingers. "I'm Marcus Hale," he said, offering a card. "Editor at American Restoration Monthly. We cover rebuild stories around the country. Someone sent us photos of your shop. And that Mustang." Sierra blinked. "Photos?" "Apparently an old friend of the Rhodes family. Said if we're looking for stories with a heartbeat, this one might stop ours entirely." He grinned. Sierra didn't. Marcus walked around the shop slowly, reverently, like he was in a museum. "This is incredible," he said. "You brought a '65 Fastback back from the dead." She shook her head. "We did." She nodded toward the volunteers. Leo, Mrs. Avery, even old Father Kent was polishing headlight rings in the corner. Marcus took a few photos. Then he pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "We're doing a special issue legacy builds. Your story's exactly what we look for: classic car, meaningful history, young rebuilder, emotional thread." He paused. "We want to feature it. Full spread, 8 pages, interview, professional shoot. Even fly you to a convention in Austin for a live session if you're up for it." Sierra stared at him. "You're serious?" He smiled. 100%? For a long second. Sierra didn't say anything, just looked at the Mustang, then down at her hands, cracked, stained, bruised. The kind of hands no magazine usually wanted on its cover. She could feel her heart rising up to her throat. "Why me?" she finally whispered. "Because this isn't about a car," Marcus said. "It's about what cars carry. Memory, loss, love, Legacy? He smiled. Caleb built it with his dad. You're finishing it with half the town. The idea of stepping onto a stage, of standing in front of people, of being seen, it terrified her. She was just a girl from Glenfield, a grease monkey who slept 4 hours a night and lived off gas station coffee and breakfast tacos. She hadn't even been to another state in 5 years. But then she thought of Caleb, of Benjamin, of the cigar box and that trembling letter, "Make her yours." Maybe this was part of making it hers. 2 weeks later, Sierra was in Austin, Texas, standing beneath spotlights brighter than any she'd worked under. The Mustang, gleaming and complete, sat on a raised platform behind her. Marcus introduced her as the girl who rebuilt a life and a legend. Her voice cracked as she told the story. Of the $600 Mustang, of the box beneath the seat, of Benjamin's quiet grief, of Caleb's blueprints, of the volunteers who gave up their weekends, of the way she found purpose, not in horsepower, but in hearts restored. When she was done, the room was silent. And then it rose with the kind of applause that shakes something loose inside you, something you didn't know you were holding, something you finally let go of. After the convention, she got offers sponsorships, guest appearances, even a TV pilot idea. But she turned most of them down. She didn't need fame. She had something better. A shop full of people who believed in something, a car with a soul, and the quiet knowledge that she had done right by a stranger's dream. And maybe, just maybe, she'd found her own along the way. Back in Glenfield, life didn't exactly slow down after Austin. If anything, it got busier, more chaotic, and somehow quieter, too. The day after Sierra returned, she opened the garage at 6 as usual, same humming lights, same rattling coffee machine. But something had shifted. She walked into her shop not as the girl barely making ends meet, but as someone who had earned her place. Not through luck, not through flash, but through grit, grace, and grease. The Mustang now sat in the front of the shop, fully restored, polished weekly by Leo, who proudly called it the town's monument. People stopped by just to see it, some to admire, others to remember. Veterans, widows, kids who never knew Caleb but heard his name like a local legend. And Sierra, she had changed too. Her shoulders sat straighter now. Her hands, though still scarred and stained, moved with more certainty. She no longer doubted herself when opening up an engine block or quoting a custom build. Confidence didn't come overnight. It had crept in slowly through long nights of frustration, bolts that wouldn't budge, parts that didn't fit, and moments she wanted to walk away. But each time she wanted to give up, she remembered Caleb's words. Don't just restore her to factory, make her yours. And she had, not just the car, her life. She started taking on more complex restoration projects, cars other garages wouldn't touch. She built her own client base not from ads or flashy websites, but from word of mouth and quiet respect. She taught Leo how to weld properly, helped Mrs. Avery set up a women in auto night class at the high school shop. Even Father Kent, bless him, came by weekly to polish chrome and talk about forgiveness and transmissions in the same breath. And then one day, Benjamin Rhodes came back. He didn't call first, just walked through the garage doors and tipped his hat. Same old leather jacket, same quiet eyes. Sierra looked up from under a '72 Camaro and grinned, back for a tune-up. He chuckled, back to see a promise kept. They stood in front of the Mustang together. Sierra handed him the keys. Want to take her for a spin? He took them, but didn't move, just stared at the hood like he was seeing a ghost. Then, carefully, he opened the door and sat inside. When the engine turned over, it purred like a heartbeat. Benjamin closed his eyes. "I can feel him in here," he whispered, like he never left. They didn't talk much after that. They didn't need to. He took the car around the block, returned it, and placed the keys back in her hand without a word. But the way he held her shoulder when he left, it said everything. Months passed. The shop grew. Sierra hired Leo full-time, started turning a profit for the first time in years. She bought a second lift, painted the walls, added a mural, a red Mustang racing through open country, with Caleb's initials hidden in the clouds. And most importantly, she finally framed the letter. Caleb's words hung above her desk now, a quiet compass for every decision she made. One night, after the last car left the bay and Leo flipped the lights off, Sierra stood alone in the silence. She ran her fingers across the edge of that letter. She thought about how far she'd come. Not just in work. In worth. For years. She'd told herself she wasn't enough, that her life would stay small, that she'd only ever be the girl left behind to fix other people's broken things. But now, she knew better. She wasn't just fixing, she was building, and not just engines, but a legacy, a life, a future. It was a warm autumn afternoon when Sierra drove the Mustang out of the shop, not to test it, not to tune it, but simply to feel it. The engine hummed like a lullaby. The chrome mirrors caught the gold of falling leaves. The steering wheel, wrapped in worn leather, seemed to know her grip by heart now. She didn't have a destination in mind, just open road, soft wind, and the weight of everything this car had come to mean. She passed the old baseball field, where her dad used to take her after school, the diner where she'd fixed a broken starter for free and ended up with pie for life, the cemetery, where Caleb's name was etched in stone, but no longer etched in silence. She slowed there, parked the Mustang beneath a tall oak tree, and sat on the hood, the metal warm beneath her jeans. She looked out across the grass, not for the headstone, but for the space around it, the lives that kept moving after loss. She whispered, "We did it, Caleb." And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was carrying someone else's dream. She felt like she'd stepped inside it and made it her own. Back at the shop, the world kept moving. Leo was prepping a '67 Firebird. Mrs. Avery was organizing tools like they were fine china. The garage buzzed with the rhythm of shared purpose. But for Sierra, something had changed. She no longer worked to survive. She built to inspire. Soon after, she was invited to speak at a local high school, not about cars, but about resilience. About how fixing engines wasn't just about torque specs and timing belts, it was about finding the courage to look at something broken and say, "I believe you're worth saving." The kids listened. Some laughed. Some nodded. One girl, shy, hiding behind her hoodie, approached after and asked if Sierra would teach her how to change her own oil. She did. And just like that, the ripple began. Sierra started a small program called Wrench and Rise, offering weekend classes for women, teens, and veterans. Basic car care, engine theory, confidence through capability. It wasn't about horsepower. It was about hope. And all of it, every single piece, had started with one decision: a $600 gamble on a broken-down Mustang, and the faith that somewhere, buried beneath rust and time, there was a reason worth uncovering. Sometimes, people would ask her if she wished she'd sold the car, instead taken the check, avoided the long nights and scraped knuckles and tears. And she'd always smile the same way. "No," she'd say, "that car didn't just change my life, it gave it direction." One evening, long after closing time, Sierra sat in the driver's seat again. The garage was dark, except for the glow of a single shop light overhead. The letter from Caleb was framed on the wall. The flash drive sat in her top drawer. And hanging from the rearview mirror, gently swaying, was the St. Christopher medal. She ran her thumb across the key in the ignition and exhaled. Not because she was tired, but because she was full of pride, of peace, of purpose. Because sometimes you don't need to race. Sometimes just putting the key in, turning the engine over, and letting the road unfold beneath you is enough to know you're exactly where you're meant to be. Anyone can rebuild something broken if they're brave enough to believe there's still beauty beneath the rust. As twilight settled over the quiet town of Glenfield, Sierra Baldwin turned off the shop lights one by one, not out of habit, but with quiet pride. The final click echoed through the empty garage like a closing chapter, but in her heart. A new one was just beginning. She no longer saw herself as the girl left behind to fix everyone else's mess. She had become the builder of dreams, the restorer of legacy, not just with wrenches, but with purpose. And now, that cherry-red Mustang wasn't just a symbol of one young soldier's unfinished story. It belonged to every girl told she wasn't strong enough, every mechanic who doubted their worth, every small-town soul who thought their dreams didn't matter. The grease-stained woman once overlooked in her father's garage had become the engine behind something greater. Because for Sierra, and for those who now follow her path, the road wasn't the end of the story. It was where everything finally began. The end? Up next, 2 more powerful stories of hope, heart, and second chances. Click to ride with us, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe some dreams are meant to be rebuilt.